The night before the Raven arrived, Bran Stark woke in silence, his eyes already open to the dark. Winterfell's courtyard stood beneath his chamber window, a wide bowl of moon-washed stone. But Bran did not see the towers or the frost-silvered wells this time. He saw instead the faint red pulse beneath the ice of the Godswood Pond, a heartbeat in slow-rolling current, and he felt the pulse in his own chest answering. It was not a dream, not quite. The truth of it lay somewhere between bone and bark, between the ancient blood of the first men that ran in the Starks of Winterfell, and the ever-listening limbs of the Weirwoods. He lingered there for what felt the length of a single breath, and the pond turned brighter, the pulse louder, until light spilled through him like morning through a cracked shutter. Then he blinked, and the world returned. Drifts of moth-pale snow on the window ledge, the hush of the keep, his own breath clouding silver in the dim. Summer lay at the foot of Bran's bed, huge head on his paws, amber eyes fixed not on the door, but on the boy himself, as though the direwolf had been waiting for him to stir from something deeper than sleep. When Bran rose, Summer stood too, moving in a stretch so slow it seemed almost ceremonial. Together without a word, even in the days when Bran still spoke aloud. The wolf needed few of them. They crossed the small room, pushed through the heavy cedar door, and paced down the corridor lit by guttering torches. Bran's feet were bare upon the flagstones, but the cold no longer bit. He kept his gaze forward, certain he would find Maester Luwin's library aglow, the iron-bound chest of Raven scrolls already open, the first message waiting. He had seen it with the clarity that visited him only on moonless nights. The ink still wet, the ribbon still curling like a sleeping serpent. He knew what it would say. He also knew Luwin would not yet understand. The Maester found him soon enough. Bran was kneeling on a stool by the hearth, feeding the embers with a single pine knot, so the light would reach every bookcase. The Maester's astrolabe chimed faintly as the door opened. In the swirl of torchlight, Luwin's chain glimmered, each link a different metal. Bronze and Valyrian steel, copper and pale silver, tin for the study of the heavens. "My prince," Luwin murmured, voice wrapped in fatigue. "You should be in bed." The castle snores. Bran turned, the pine knot crackling behind him. "The Raven comes at dawn," he said. Maester Luwin's brows drew together beneath his gray fringe. He brought a hand to his link-heavy collar as if feeling for one that could explain the boy's certainty. "You have seen this?" The question tried to stay gentle yet quivered with unease. Bran nodded. Summer padded to the Maester's side and sniffed at his sleeve. "It carries tidings from Castle Black. Benjen Stark rides for the northmost ranges. He will not return." Bran said the words plainly. They tasted like truth left too long unsaid. Luwin absorbed the blow, hands folding beneath his robes. "Your uncle only left a fortnight past. Ravens cannot overtake men on horseback, nor could Castle Black know so swiftly if—" He stopped. Bran's eyes, too old on too young a face, unsettled him. "Will you come back to bed if I promise to see the rookery at first light?" "I will come back to bed," Bran allowed, but his tone revealed how little the promise mattered. The thing was set. The Raven was already winging past the last river, its shadow looping over moonlit snowfields. Bran had glimpsed but never walked. He went as far as the threshold before turning. "Maester," he said, and Luwin paused. Bran's voice lowered, threaded with an echo neither boy nor Maester could name. "Ready ink and parchment. Lord Father must write before noon." "There is still," he faltered, feeling the pulse of the Godswood Pond in his chest again, strong, insistent. "There is still a path that may keep him alive." The wolf nudged Luwin's hand as if to add weight. The Maester swallowed, nodded, and Bran went. Ned Stark read the message while dawn unspooled, pale gold beyond his solar's narrow windows. Bran watched from the fireside, Summer at his feet, as his father's face tightened. The words were few. Jon's neat hand, as crisp as northern ice. "Benjen gone, last seen east of the Shadow Tower. Ranger satchels found snow scattered. Signs of dead men walking. Will scout again. Send more as able." "It is a phantom's tale," Ned muttered, yet he read the message thrice. He laid it beside a wax-stamped sheet bearing the direwolf sigil, Luwin's fresh parchment, blank and waiting. Bran felt the weight of choice hover. If his father wrote now, The ink would shape more than letters. The path Bran had glimpsed, splitting like pale roots under the ice, hung upon whether Eddard Stark reached for the quill before the sun touched the broken tower's highest crenellation. Summer's claws clicked softly on rushes. Bran stood. "Father," he said, very small in the oak-walled room. "Send riders to the night fort. Bid them take axes to the weirwood doors. Bring back splinters and shavings, every ghost of that old wood. Burn them on the wall's ice. Do this before the next moon wanes." His voice shook on the last instruction, memory of visions still hot. "It will keep the shadows from growing." Ned stared at his son. The direwolf pup had already grown half as tall as Bran, golden eyes bright and baleful, muzzle speckled gray with melting frost. Bran felt summer's steadiness in his spine. He let that strength tether his plea. "Where did you learn of shadows that grow?" Ned asked. They whispered. Bran replied, truth simple, from roots and stone. From Uncle Benjamin's footsteps going silent, and from a woman with skin pale as milkwater who stands in halls of carved snow. He did not add that the woman's face sometimes flickered with the shape of his mother's. He did not think he needed to. His father's eyes carried the shadow of that fear already. Silence filled the solar's corners. Ned raised a hand to his beard, thumb brushing his jawline. At last he lifted the quill. "I will send men," he said, "but not to hack the doors of the night fort. I will write Lord Commander Mormont. He will know what is needed." Bran did not argue. The river of time forked by many stones. The necessary truth was that men of the watch would burn weirwood shavings on the wall. Whether they came from the night fort doors or the grove near Greyguard mattered less than that it happened soon. Bran felt the current shift as Ned pressed quill to parchment. In the Godswood, a soft rustle of ravens lifting from frosted branches brushed his inner hearing like winter wind through reeds. The first stone in the river had been laid. He exhaled. By the middle of that same day, 24 sworn shields rode south from Winterfell on Ned's orders, ostensibly to escort a grain caravan to villages outside the Neck, but with sealed instructions to tarry at Greywater Watch, gather green men of the Crannogs, and proceed to the wall bearing fire for ice. It was a quiet command, unannounced in hall or yard, and it went unnoticed by most. Yet Bran felt its wake ripple outward. He felt it when old Nan spilled cider near the hearth, and whispered that the chill in her bones was lifting, if only for the hour. He felt it when Hodor hummed a new tune with no words, but a warmth beneath the syllable. The castle breathed a fraction easier. But not Bran. Each stone placed across the river only revealed the next. The tapestry he'd glimpsed in the darkness of his mind was vast, and still curling threads cast long shadows. Uncle Benjamin's trail led to a place Bran had never seen in waking life. Jagged peaks lancing a sky like torn vellum, a valley floor where frost-burnt pine clung to life by roots swallowed in snow. There, beyond measured miles, an arm of the weirwood's buried heart still beat. Bran felt its echo, like a warning and a promise, every time he closed his eyes. On the third night after the Raven, Bran found himself longing for that pulse once more. He thought perhaps he could follow it deeper, find Benjamin's living thread and tug. He waited until the castle lay dark, but for patrol lamps on the battlements, then slipped from his furs. Summer roused instantly, and together they walked beyond the keep to the Godswood. Frost-coated branches glinted like brittle glass in the moonlight. The orange faces carved in weirwood trunks glowed blood red where sap wept. Bran pressed his hand to the largest sentinel, the one whose roots sank beneath the black pond. The bark was cold, yet throbbed faint heat beneath its living skin, as if the tree's heart pumped slower than any animal, but pumped all the same. "Show me," Bran whispered. The word misted the air, carried by an eddy of wind. He closed his eyes and let summer's warmth brush his ankle, and the trunk's whispers fill his ears. The shift came sudden and sharp, like falling through thin ice. Bran plunged into darkness and emerged in gray twilight, eyes no longer his own. He saw through the wings of a monstrous raven. No mere crow of the rookery, but a bird thrice the span, feathered in night black, each plume edged with faint silver. Mountains rose below, serrated, hung with wreaths of cloud. Updrafts buffeted his borrowed wings. The air hissed between pinions. He banked toward a narrow pass, where thin trails of smoke coiled upward from a cluster of torches. Men stood there, 5, 6, cloaked in furs so thick their shapes blurred into pillars of shaggy darkness. One clutched a horn half encased in rime, lifting it to his lips. The sound that followed was low, mournful, and impossibly vast. It rattled snow from ledges miles distant. Bran felt the reverberation in every borrowed bone. The men did not look like watch rangers. Their eyes glinted blue as polished ice. In their midst stood a figure unlike the rest, tall and lank, armored in petrified leather that seemed grown from deep forest rot. His face, or what passed for one, was an ivory mask streaked with age-dark veins. When he moved, the air crystallized around him. Bran tried to shift the raven away, but invisible fingers tugged at his vantage, pinning him to the gulf above the pass. The masked one raised a slender hand, blue fire burning in the sockets where eyes should be. With the other he touched the horn, and the horn cracked down its length, splitting with a shriek into the mountain's roar. From the fissure spilled not blood, nor ash, but a ribbon of pale mist that coiled around his arm before dissipating into a broadening circle. An arch cut into emptiness itself. Beyond the arch, Bran saw nothing and everything. A null space pulsing like the black between far stars. Cold bled from it, bottomless. He understood then why the shavings of weirwood must burn upon the wall. The wall was a lock, this was the keyhole. And someone had found a key. The bird convulsed, wings beating chaotically. A wild will not his own yanked Bran upward, tearing him back through swirling snow until the mountains dwindled to jagged shadows, until the sky blanked white, until there was only the hush of high wind and the rasp of a deer wolf's muzzle pressed to his cheek. He sat in the godswood, collapsed against the tree, shaking. Summer whined. Bran tasted blood on his tongue where he'd bitten down, though he did not remember doing so. Not yet, Bran breathed, unsure if he meant the horn's shatter or his own unraveling. He climbed trembling to his feet and leaned upon Summer. Not yet. We can still move the stones. From the edge of the clearing, a figure stepped into light. Leaf, child of the forest, neither child nor of the forest entirely, regarded Bran with golden green eyes, luminous against her dark oak skin. She was smaller than Bran had imagined from old Nan's stories, but he felt her presence like a knight's armored bulk. "You looked too far, little Stark," she said, her voice like wind sliding through cedar needles. "Each sight costs. Hold to the bark until your roots grow deeper." Bran's mouth was too dry for words. He managed a nod. Leaf's glance touched Summer, then Bran again. "The horn was used once before a man set stone upon ice," she said. "If it sounds again, the wall falls. This you see," Bran whispered. "Yes. Then know also. Fire alone cannot mend ice so deep." She moved a hand, and between her slender fingers flickered a mote of blue flame, pale as glacial crystals. "You will need a song of dragon steel, sung thrice in blood, thrice in bone, and thrice in the tongue of roots. Do you understand this rhyme?" "No," Bran admitted, heart hammering. "You will." Leaf's lips curved in something nearly a smile, though sorrow shadowed it. "For now, keep your father's men moving. Keep the wall awake." She stepped back, merged with night, and was gone. Bran swayed. Summer pressed close. The red pulse beneath the pond in his mind had steadied, but Bran felt its echo shift with dread urgency. He understood now that every move he made would draw counter-moves from powers long dormant. The story of the world was not a straight line. It was a woven mat of living roots. Some roots drank light. Others thirsted for uncreation. He tightened a hand in Summer's fur and limped toward the castle lights. Time beckoned neither friend nor foe. It was river, and he a swimmer mid-current. To rest was to drown. 2 weeks later, a second raven arrived, feathers peppered in frost. Lord Commander Mormont's reply bore grim news. Benjen Stark remained missing. 3 rangers more besides, and wildlings whispered of dead things in the frost fangs. Yet buried within the maester's ink lay a seed of hope. Patches of weirwood tinder at the base of the wall ignited hotter than coal, burning blue-white and leaving black glass where fire licked ice. The wall, Mormont wrote, sang when the glass cooled, as though wind within the stone found new hollows. Some brothers feared this sign, some prayed. The old bear asked what counsel Lord Stark offered. Ned, troubled, brought the letter to his solar where Bran sat studying maps of the far north. Carlin Glover, captain of the Winterfell wagon escorts, stood nearby, recounting the men's progress through the neck. When he finished, Ned dismissed Glover and turned to Bran. "You said the burning would hold shadows at bay," Ned reminded. "The wall's song doesn't sound like defense." "It is breathing," Bran said quietly. "Ice that sleeps too long forgets breath. The glass wakes it." His father studied him. In those gray eyes Bran saw warring against trust. But at last, Ned placed the letter upon a sheaf of new parchment. "I ride to Moat Cailin in 4 days," he said. "From there, I will send a faster courier north, and I will write the Lord Commander that more tinder will come." A pause. "I will also ask King Robert for dragon steel. He will laugh, of course, but perhaps the smiths of Cahor still know the secret." "You would need 3 swords," Bran said, repeating Leif's riddle. "One for breath of man, one for song of earth, one for roar of sky." Ned's brow creased. He placed a hand on Bran's shoulder, a touch weighted by fear and fealty. "Tell me plainly, son, are these words your own, or do you speak for ghosts?" "I speak for winter," Bran answered, "and for what comes before winter, and what must follow." It was not a child's answer nor a man's, but something the godswood whispered between. As Lord Stark readied his journey, Bran turned his thoughts to the south. The king would likely scoff at pleas for dragonsteel. If Robert reached Winterfell at all. Bran's dreams had shown a boar's tusk, a shattered breastplate, a crimson lake in Summerhall's forgotten woods. In those paths, the king died long before any raven from Winterfell could reach King's Landing. That too was a stone to shift. On the eve of Ned's departure, Bran sought his sisters. Sansa embroidered in the solar, tracing silken petals upon gray cloth, her direwolf banner in bloom. Arya sparred with Jon in the courtyard, wooden blades clacking under torchlight. Bran approached Arya first, sensing in her the same restless root that thrived in him. The yearning to move beneath a sky too wide for childhood walls. When Jon bowed out, sweating, Bran caught Arya's wrist. "You must go south with father," he told her under the hiss of drifting snow. "When he rides for King's Landing, you will insist. Stay close to the Queen's children, but watch her eyes. Where her eyes linger, trouble lies." Bran had never spoken so many commands to Arya, yet something in his voice stilled her retorts. She swallowed, nodded once, the hard glint in her gray eyes a mirror of his own resolve. Sansa proved harder. She heard Bran's warning, "Tell the Queen a wolf dreams of a hunter cloaked in gold. If she laughs, do not dine near her wine," and laughed herself. "Bran, you sound mad as the kettle song," she teased, reaching to tug his ear. Yet Bran persevered, weaving small visions into language that might sway her. How needles of shadow pricked at court, how songs would twist, how princes could be kind, until the moment they were not. In the end, it was the mention of songs that stilled her laughter. Sansa dreamed of songs made true. If Bran promised a chance to shape one, by whispering wolf courier riddles to a court grown deaf to truth, she would at least ride south. And if the strands he nudged aligned, she might save more than one life at tourney. A little bird could sing louder than any bass horn, if the right ear bent near. Bran's own ears rang every night with the horn's mournful echo from the mountains of his vision. Leif taught him to breathe through it, to let sound pass like wind through branches, leaving shape but not wound. Days bled to weeks. The wall's song spread tales from Castle Black to Eastwatch. How on storm nights the ice hummed like a harp string, sending shivers through torches, making steel blades tremble in scabbards. Some men went half mad with dread. Others claimed the wall spoke of victory. The horn in the Frostfangs had not sounded again, yet. One dusk, as a crimson sunset slashed the sky above the battlements, a lone rider galloped through Winterfell's gate, a Karstark scout, face haggard, cloak tattered. He bore 2 blades, wrapped in oilskin. "Found these near Deepwood Motte," he gasped. "Truest steel I ever seen. Swear they shone silver blue in starlight. Old Cranagman said these were dragon steel." He hesitated before adding, "There were once 3. Ned received the weapons in the great hall." Bran stood at his side, and when the cloth peeled back, his breath caught. The blades were slender, curve-edged, unlike North-forged longswords. Closer cousin to Valyrian steel, yet softer sheen. Their balance felt as though the air itself bent to hold the metal. Bran sensed deep notes in them, chords that resonated with the wall's distant hum. 2 of 3, for Leaf had said thrice. A day later, Howland Reed himself arrived, lean and reed tall as his name, bearing the 3rd. "Found at Queen's Crown's Weirwood," he told Ned, "left as offering by nameless hands." The blade matched the other pair as a triplet. Bran touched the hilt of one, and memory, or prophecy, flashed. A swirl of ashes spiraling under a sky of broken stars. A man with snow-dusted black hair raising the sword against an unseen foe. Blue fire licking down its length. The vision recoiled when Bran blinked. Summer snarled softly, as though seeing the same. 3 swords, Bran whispered. 3 songs. He looked up at Leaf, who stood half-shadow beside a pillar, unseen by most. She nodded. The world was gathering itself. That night, Bran sat with his family before Ned's departure south. Catelyn held Bran's hand, though he knew her eyes were for Ned. For Robb's new-grown shoulders, for the 2 daughters who would soon ride beyond her reach. She was mother to them all, and worry laced her every word. As torches guttered, Bran slipped away and found Maester Luwin beside the glass candles. Antique curios too long dulled to burn. Bran guided the Maester's trembling hand to the base of the tallest candle. "Speak true, Maester," he urged. "Ask the candle if the wall stands." Luwin, long skeptic of wildfire glass tales, nonetheless obeyed. And as his whisper brushed the glass, a coal of green-white light sparked within, swirling, blooming to a fierce, steady glow. Maester Luwin staggered back as the chamber flooded with eerie radiance. In the jagged shadows cast, Bran saw his path lit clear. The wall, the swords, the horn, the arch of emptiness, and a choice that must bridge them all. The Maester sank to his knees, astonishment carving deep lines across his face. Bran knelt too, placing a steadying hand on the old man's shoulder. "We will need knowledge," Bran said. "All that Valyria knew of binding fire to steel. All that the children remembered before the first dawn. Help me find it." Luwin's voice shook. "If the candle answers, the world will no longer doubt sorcery. Then doubt will no longer slow us." The candle flame danced, casting swirls of ghost green across dusty volumes. Bran rose, feeling taller than he had that morning, taller than any 10-year-old boy had right to feel. The river was racing faster now. Stones once laid must hold. From the inner curtain of Bran's mind, the pond's pulse rang true. Steady, patient, relentless. Winter was coming. But winter, if known, might be guided. And the greatest wars were sometimes ended before a single sword left its scabbard. So Bran walked back to his chamber where summer awaited, curled like living dusk. He lay beside his direwolf, closed his eyes, and let roots spread beneath him. Down through stone, through earth, through ages, until his breath matched the heartbeat of the hidden world. There, in the quiet between one pulse and the next, he began to weave a dream of spring. A.K. The last ember in the brazier guttered to ash, before Bran stirred from the deep cloth of dream. Somewhere beyond the shuttered windows, a hush of first snow sifted across Winterfell's roofs, a ghostly rustle half caught by the thick stones. Summer dozed at the foot of the bed, flank rising with a rhythm that matched the quiet pulse Bran felt within his own chest. A familiar tide now, steady as the heartbeat of the Weirwood pond. Bran stretched one hand toward the wolf's fur, fingers combing through the silver-tipped guard hairs that shone like frost. The contact anchored him. It had been a long night of paths walked inside other skins, and the body he returned to felt strangely small, as though his spirit had grown wider than flesh. He lay still, cataloging fragments of the visions before time could erode them. One had carried him through the talons of an owl gliding over the wolf's wood, where riders in gray cloaks circled a darkened homestead. The owl's eyes, his eyes, had narrowed upon sigils none of the other nocturnal creatures would understand. Pale sunbursts on salt-stained leather, sigils of House Mullen. Yet the men beneath the cloaks did not smell of the north. Another vision had drawn him under the ice of the wall itself, into caverns where cold mist drifted like milkweed. There he had glimpsed a boy with skull-white hair, breathing frost that draped the tunnels in brittle lace. The boy had turned as though hearing Bran's heartbeat, and in the sockets of his eyes burned flickers of sapphire. But it was the third dream that mattered most, the forging song of dragonsteel. He had stood beside a round forge set into an island of obsidian. Molten metal, pale and luminous, flowed like living moonlight into channels carved as runes Bran could not yet read. Around the forge crouched 6 figures. 3 were children of the forest, Leaf among them, each singing notes low and fluted, shaped like bird calls until the air trembled. Opposite them knelt 3 humans. Bran recognized none by face, yet he knew their blood. One of the Durrandons before the line fell to Baratheon, one a Stark-born centuries past, the last a woman with sand-coiled braids, who bore a twisting spear of dawn-bright steel. They sang, too, their notes braiding with the children's. Bone and breath, blood and sky. The cadence of the riddle leaf had spoken. When the final chord rang, the molten stream hardened in a single instant, and Bran felt the wall exhale far to the north, as though eased of some invisible weight. The vision slipped like water between fingers, but its echo lingered. Bran sat up, swung his legs over the sideboards. He felt again the troublesome diminishment of his limbs. Still the legs of a boy, still willowy from months of lost riding. Yet the forge chant throbbed in his skull like a war drum. They would need that song in truth, not merely as prophetic shard. And songs were stories before they were spoken aloud. Bran breathed slow, binding memory to marrow. At midday, he joined Master Luwin in the library tower. The glass candle still burned green-white, waning only when the maester slept. Its fire threw spears of jade-hued light across the stacked scrolls and dust-shrouded tomes, gilding cobwebs in eerie brilliance. Luwin hunched over a vellum map of cities gone to ruin. Valeria in the days before doom, if the maester guessed aright. He pushed a tarnished lens along the curling coastline, murmuring names that no longer graced living tongues. Tyria? Tel Narax? Borash? Bran waited until Luwin's finger paused upon a crumbling peninsula shaped like a dragon's wing. Bohorash forged the greatest of bright steel, Bran said, repeating knowledge he could not recall learning. Their temples rang with sun hammers, and the sound carried leagues over sea. The words emerged gentle, but Luwin jerked as though Bran had shouted. The maester angled his spectacles downward, studying the boy's face. "Where did you read that?" Luwin asked, quill poised above a blank parchment. "Nowhere written here," Bran answered. "But the trees remember, and a man made of shadow and salt whispered it, as I climbed through rivers of smoke upon the long bridge of Volandaris. Menna." Luwin opened and closed his mouth. The candle's flame shivered, casting double shadows of both maester and boy. "If any proof remains," he said at length, "we must scour Maester Marwyn's collection in Old Town. Yet, Old Town is far, and in these times, we will send word by glass," Bran said. "If the Archmaester will not come to us, at least his books may sail." Luwin looked to the glowing candle, green fire mirrored in spectacles. "If this light truly reaches the citadel, perhaps we may ask." He seemed to shrink a little, as if the enormity of bridging half a world with such art weighed heavier than all the chains about his neck. Still, he set ink to parchment. Should the books sail, we must ensure their escort. The seas churn with corsairs. I shall draft a request for Lord Glover's longships. Bran nodded. He traced the Dragon Wing Peninsula once more, noting how the ink strokes pooled at its southern tip, as though a little of the painted sea sought always to drown that land. In his dream, the molten metal had sung like the sea too, but with a yearning undertone. Steel missed the ocean the way stone missed sky. By twilight, A storm began to prowl the western horizon, herding great purple clouds above the godswood. Wind fled before it, and the ravens perched within the heart tree squabbled in uneasy caws. Bran ventured there even so, riding upon Hodor's broad back. Summer trotted ahead, tail a silver pennant. They found Leaf beside the black pool, slender hands cupped over its dark surface, as though warming them at a non-existent fire. "You wade too deep," she murmured when Bran slid off Hodor's shoulders. "Too soon. Tides will claim you if you chase every echo. Even my people drown when the song grows loud." Bran stepped to the water's edge. "It is not an echo any longer. It is a call. We need the forge." Leaf regarded him with ageless sorrow. "Need does not bend hours to mortals. The mountain where the horn sleeps is hundreds of leagues. The song of steel must be sung closer, else we arrive too late to sing at all." Bran watched ripples swirl where a snowflake kissed the pond. "There is ancient fire beneath Winterfell," he said. "Catelyn once told me the hot springs keep the walls from icing solid. If heat can be guided through brick and mortar, might it not feed a forge?" Leaf turned her gaze toward the unseen springs. "Warm water is but a sigh of dragon flame, cooled by earth. To wake that heat into steel's hunger, the breath of true fire must be coaxed. Then teach me the breath." A raven lighted on a branch above them, shaking snow from its wings. It rasped a single word of old tongue. Leaf tilted her head as though listening to some longer phrase. When she spoke again, her voice had stiffened like tree rings recalling long winters. "To breathe fire that shapes fate, you must first grip frost. Balance stands at the heart of the river. Can you speak the cold you fear?" Bran hesitated. Images rose unbidden. The horn-blown pass, the masked figure wrapped in deathly hue, the arch yawning like a wound in the veil. His skin prickled, the memory of that unnatural chill crawling under nails. "I can try." "Then try now." Leaf placed both palms on the frozen earth and closed her eyes. Around the grove, the dusk deepened. Wind ceased, as though the sky sucked in breath and held it. Bran lowered himself onto the mossy bank opposite her. Summer pressed a shoulder against his back, a buttress of warmth. Bran inhaled until cold air stung. He sought the shape of the frost he had felt in the tunnels, the ancient cold, hungrier than any mere night's nip. He let it slide into him, through him, traveling the lattice of his bones like a silent weir network. His fingertips numbed, his breath crystallized to drifting motes that clinked faintly as they fell. He felt the world narrow to a pupil of ice. Leaf's eyes opened, green diamonds in the dim. "Hold," she whispered. Bran held. The ice inside him thickened until his heartbeat slowed to a glacial rhythm. Part of him feared it would stop. Then Leaf reached across the pond. No longer water, but a mirror of black glass. With a single tap of her finger, a hairline crack raced across that mirror, and a plume of white steam surged up, blinding. The steam billowed between them, roiling, twisting. Bran felt the cold in his chest seize, then melt. Warmth rushed in behind like floodwater freed by a broken dam. He gasped, fingers clenching Summer's ruff. The wolf whined, and Bran smelled singed hair, though no flame touched them. When the vapor thinned, the pond had shifted again to placid water. Uncracked. Bran's breath came quick, visible in short bursts. Leaf's hair clung damp to her temples, but satisfaction warmed her feral smile. "You spoke one syllable," she said. "A child's syllable, but ice heard. Keep the shape of it. When the forge calls, shape it thrice, each time stronger." Bran nodded, still shaking. "And the fire?" "Fire will answer once frost bows." Leaf tipped her chin toward the sky. Snow began to fall in earnest, blanketing reed and root. "Come. The storm is a herald. Inside stone walls you will dream further." Catelyn Stark woke that night to the howl of wolves and the hammering of rain on tower roofs. She rose and lit a taper, its orange ring reflecting in Ned's empty side of the bed. He had gone at dawn 2 days past. She drew her robe tighter as she crossed to the window. Below, the courtyard churned with pools of water that mirror-flashed each lightning stroke. For a breath, she thought she saw a shape gliding across the cobbles, a great gray ghost with eyes like embers. But when the lightning faded, only storm shadows reared and leapt. She might have returned to bed but for a distant clang echoing from the smithy yard. No man hammered at this hour. Heart quickening, she snatched a cloak, descended spiral stairs, and stepped into the raw night, taper guttering. The clang sounded again, oddly arrhythmic, as though some giant worked an anvil deep underground. Each blow boomed, then throbbed, shaking water droplets from the archway stones. Caitlin followed the vibration across the outer bailey and past the kennels, their hounds silent with pricked ears. She rounded the last corner and halted. The old bronze bell that hung near the armory swayed furiously, though no hand pulled its rope. It tolled once, twice more, the clapper striking with uneven force. As she stared, a crust of ice formed around the bell's lip, spreading downward in lacy fingers till the metal glimmered white in the torchlight. Then, as if satisfied, the bell stilled. "Lady Stark," called a voice behind her. Tom Barleycorn, sergeant of guards, jogged up, sword bared. He had felt the courtyard tremors too. His eyes widened at the frost-rimmed bronze. "7, save us." "Why is it frozen?" "The forge coals have not been out long." "I do not know," Caitlin whispered, though something inside her stirred dreadfully. She thought of Bran and his strange silences, of Maester Luwin's sudden preoccupation with writing that never left the library. She touched the bell. The ice shattered at the gentlest knock, clinking to the stones in shining shards that fizzed to mist. Yet the surface beneath was warm, as though the bronze hit a living ember. Tom made the sign of the 7-pointed star, then sheathed his blade. "Storm devils," he muttered. Perhaps, Caitlin allowed herself to think, but devils never ring warnings so plainly. She turned back toward the keep, her taper now burned out, its stump hissing in rain. The howling of wolves had ceased, but wind whipped through arrow slits with a sound unpleasantly like distant horns. South of Winterfell, the storm fell from sky to swamp, lashing Moat Cailin with sleet as Ned Stark's party crossed the causeway. The Crennog towers glimmered in wet torchlight, their muddied timber frames hunched like drowned giants. Ned dismounted beside Howland Reed and drew his cloak tight. Waters sluiced off scaled pauldrons hissed by lantern heat. "Our boys will cough half the night," Ned said, nodding to the men leading soaked garrons under the gatehouse. Howland's thin smile cut through rain. "Breathe the swamp air, and lungs remember to empty old dust. Let them cough. Better here than coughing black blood on ice." Ned grunted. Talk of ice reminded him of the wall's humming song, carried south in Mormont's letters. He glanced east, where bog and sky merged in roiling darkness. Somewhere beyond that horizon lay White Harbor, and the waiting ships bearing his sealed commands. More weirwood tinder, the dragging steel blades under iron lock, and provisions enough to feed the night's watch through 3 winters if need arose. Yet, need would arise faster than storehouses filled, he feared. "In 2 mornings we ride for Torrhen Square," Ned said. "From there, I push south to King's Landing. Reed men know the marshes. Will they guide Sansa and Arya quickly if trouble grows behind us?" "Dai. We will row them through paths no knightly steed could follow," Howland promised. "Your girls will eat frog's leg and laugh at southern feasts by winter's turn." Ned's mouth twitched at that. Frogs and feasts. But his thoughts turned again to Robert's court, the heady brew of Lannister gold and Tyrell whispers. Bran's warnings pressed at him. A wolf dreams of a hunter cloaked in gold. Ned's hand tightened on the hilt of ice. The wolf must not walk blindly. Lightning flared. For an instant, Ned thought he saw slender shapes flickering between rushes, too tall for men, too slender for reeds. When thunder boomed, they were gone. "Storm devils," Howland murmured, echoing Tom Barleycorn's phrase far to the north. Ned glanced at him, rain dripping from his beard. "Do devils still walk swamps?" Howland Reed's eyes gleamed. "Only when men walk devils' paths." At Castle Black, the wall's music had shifted from hum to palpable throb. Jon Snow stood atop the parapet, cloak snapping as moonlight poured over 60 fathoms of translucent ice. The wind carried a low chord, that seemed to vibrate within his very bones. Ghost, his albino direwolf, paced along the edge, red eyes aflame in the half-light. Each time the cord deepened, Ghost paused, head cocked as though listening to a language no man had tongues for. Sam Tarley joined John, puffing clouds in the night air. "It's louder than yesterday," Sam said, hugging his cloak. "Do you think it's dangerous?" John laid a gloved hand upon the wall's ice. It thrummed like a wounded harp. "A shield that sings is still a shield," he said, repeating a line he had read once in a treatise on castle defense. Yet he doubted the treatise's author had ever met a living fortress. Far below, torches waxed and waned in the courtyard. The old bear paced with Sir Jeremy Riker beside wagons stacked high with weirwood bundles fetched from Greyguard's Grove. Lanterns cast spectral shadows over the branches, their red bark caught in amber glass. Brothers hauled the bundles toward lifts, muttering at the sap bleeding onto gloves. Pink streaks more like flesh wound than tree heart. "They'll burn another heap at dawn," Sam observed. The watch disliked sacrifices made before breakfast. John remembered Bran's letter, written in a careful hand, unlike the exuberant scrawl of childhood, warning that the fire must feed the wall or shadows would grow. He had laughed once at his brother's talk of ghostly trees, but that had been before Ghost found him on the edge of frost-wreathed death. Before he had seen blue-eyed corpses rise in black of night. "Let them grumble," John said. "If the fire keeps death at bay, singe every breakfast to ash." Sam shivered harder. Death walks too near already. Dewin swears the weirwood piles creak in voices when no wind blows. I half believe him. John started to answer when Ghost halted stiffly. Hackles lifted along the wolf's spine. A different note shivered through the wall. Higher, sharper, painful to ear. John clenched his teeth. Sam clapped hands to his head. Ice dust trickled from crenels. The cord rose, then broke like a snapped lute string. Silence crashed after, heavy and absolute. For a heartbeat, not even wind breathed. Then Ghost howled. Torches bloomed across the yard as alarm bells clanged. John leaned over the parapet. On the eastern flank of the rampart, the ice had cracked, a thin, jagged fissure spiraling downward, glowing faintly blue, as though lightning were trapped inside. Brothers pointed, shouted. Seratin Witas stumbled onto the walkway, gaping. "Fetch the old bear," John shouted down. "And bring the dragon steel, now." He did not know whether the pale swords Ned had sent could mend ice, but he knew no other edge forged by man would bite so deep. John looked northward into the endless night. Thick clouds cloaked the land, yet he sensed movement far on the starless horizon, a ripple in the dark, as if something vast shifted its weight. Ghost whined at his side. John drew breath, tasting the walls cold in his lungs. The same cold Bran must have felt beneath Winterfell. The balance of frost and flame hung by threads thinner than hair. They would soon know whether men singing by Weirfire could hold the night. Bran woke from the wall vision with a start. Morning sunlight striped his floorboards, but a chill clung to him like cobweb. Summer lay alert, muzzle resting across Bran's ankles. Through the open window came the clang of hammers striking steel, real hammers, not the earth-deep booms Catelyn had chased. Gendry Waters had arrived 3 days ago with the Karstark caravan, an apprentice smith of rare talent, lured north by Lord Stark's promise of silver. Now Gendry shaped raw iron into new lock plates for Winterfell's gate, but Bran sensed the hammer rhythm carried more than metalwork. Each stroke struck sparks that drifted red gold, sounds echoing leaf notes of the forge chant from his dream. He sat up, mind racing. The smith's yard, the hot springs below. A boy who swings a hammer like a drum. Perhaps the ruins of Borash were leagues away, but song might root in new soil if the right throat opened. Bran rose, pulled a tunic over raw thin shoulders, and slipped outside. Gendry's anvil nested beneath a makeshift awning rigged with tarps to shield rain. Steam wafted where hot metal met damp air. Bran watched from behind a tool rack as the youth hammered a glowing billet. The strokes were heavy yet precise, each blow shaping the steel's edges with instinct more than training. Gendry paused to quench, then glanced at Bran. "Lord," He panted softly, cheeks flushed. "Listen," Bran said. "Do you hear a hum in the iron?" Gendry frowned, held the cooling billet to his ear. "Only ringing from the strike." "It rings different under this sky," Bran insisted. "Hit it once more." The boy shrugged. He reheated the billet, lifted the hammer, and struck. Bran closed his eyes. Beneath the clang he heard a faint undersong, similar to the walls but gentler, like a plucked bowstring half smothered by wool. He stepped forward. "Again, but place your strike nearer the tip. Let the edge sing." "Namasin." Gendry obeyed. This time the metal's cry raised the hair on Bran's arms. Summer growled low behind him, ears laid back. Sparks flew. Bran sensed a flicker of heat far below, within the hot spring veins. An answering quake. "What do you want of me, lordling?" Gendry asked, wary. "To help me forge a song," Bran said. "Not yet. Soon. When the steel arrives." He imagined the 3 dragonsteel blades glimmering under anvil light. "You will know the rhythm by then." Gendry wiped sweat with forearm. "I shape horseshoes and nails, not Valyrian miracles." Bran smiled, faint but sure. "Every grand song begins with small notes. Keep hammering and listen." He left the yard, heart quick. With each step he thought of the fracture at Castle Black, of ghosts howl skimming the void between their minds. Time pressed in waves, but a forge's bellows could tame waves into pulse. If the crack in the ice yawned wider, the only answer would be steel tuned to dragonfire, sung by throats of frost and root. He must teach Gendry the first of those syllables before the horn sounded again. That night, while Summer kept watch, Bran took quill and ink to parchment. He wrote in a mixture of common tongue and the glyphs Leaf had carved into weirwood bark, the symbols curving like branches angling towards sun. The letter was addressed to Jon Snow, Castle Black. It bore no salutation, no signature, only counsel: mend ice with breath of 3. Place bright steel in crack. Strike with hammer beating heart. 7. Sing the note of gray wind at dawn's first pale. Repeat thrice. When the note holds, the wall will breathe. If it shatters, flee east of ice. He sanded the ink, folded the parchment into a raven tube, and walked to the rookery. In the torchlit gloom, great black birds rustled on perches. Bran chose a speckled fellow with 1 white feather in its tail. Swift and clever, Maester Luwin had said, and tied the note gently. Then he opened the arch window. Wind burst in, scattering straw dotting. The raven leapt and vanished into snow-striped dark. Bran watched the bird's silhouette wing southward, till night swallowed it. "Fly true," he whispered. Behind him the rookery torch fluttered, coughing sparks. 1 ember drifted to the floor, glowing bright as dragon steel before it died. Far north, at the foot of a nameless mountain, a horn of pale bony ice rested upon a pedestal carved from frozen tears. The masked figure stood beside it, surrounded by 6 wights who once had names. He regarded the horn, then the horizon where purple storm clouds glimmered with distant lightning. His blue eyes narrowed. He sensed the wall's song falter, felt the crack searing like a wound across his vision. He extended one hand, palm hovering an inch above the horn's rim. A sigh of frost breathed from the horn's hollow throat, coiling around his wrist. He did not lift the horn. Instead, he trailed clawed fingers along its spiral. Cracks riddled its surface, hairline yet spreading. "Not yet ready," the cold seemed to say. "Not yet." He turned to the wights. Their eyes glowed, awaiting command. With a gesture, he dispatched 2 southward toward a narrow gorge, where fresh dead men lay unburied beneath snow. They would find new soldiers there, knit flesh to ice, swell the ranks until the horn's second note could thunder. When crimson dawn touched the peaks, the figure stepped back, arms outstretched. The arch of emptiness answered, rippling open behind him. He walked into that dark, disappearing like a dream between breaths. Arya Stark's first lesson in courtier's deceit came earlier than anyone intended. 5 leagues shy of the neck, their column overtook a litter mired in bog mud. Gilded lions emblazoned its lacquered panels. The guardsman who had ridden flank lay slain, throats neat cut. Sir Roderick Castle halted the escort at once. Arya wriggled through wheels and horses to peer inside. A dwarf, small even for dwarfkin, lay curled upon the cushioned floor, wrists bound. His fine doublet, striped in Lannister crimson and gold, clung wet near the ribs. When his eyes cracked open, Arya glimpsed terror bright as brandy. "Water," he croaked. Ser Roderick knelt. "Who did this?" "Bandits," the dwarf wheezed. "Or so they claimed. They searched for gold but spoke of ice." He winced. "Said the North will pay when the wall falls?" Arya's pulse raced. She remembered Bran's warning. "Watch the Queen's eyes." She pushed forward. "Who are you to name my family's wall?" The dwarf blinked at her small, fierce face. Tyrion Lannister," he rasped. "One-time hand to the king, now hostage to passing storms, it seems." Roderick stiffened. Arya sensed swords gripping hilts behind her. "The king sits Robert Baratheon," Sir Roderick said. "You speak treason." Tyrion smiled wanly. "I speak of the past. The court is fluid as wine. Uncork the wrong vintage, and the smell turns sour." He sagged. "If you'll grant me water, girl wolf, I could tell you what those bandits truly sought." Roderick hesitated, but Arya had already tugged a skin from a saddle pommel. She pressed it to the dwarf's lips. He gulped, coughed, gulped again. Color seeped back into his cheeks. "They wanted a book," Tyrion said. "A tome bound in jet-black leather, stolen from the citadel. Something about forging?" They spoke of dragons breathing cold. He laughed bitterly. "Imagine that. Dragons should breathe fire, yet these fools chase frost breath." Arya exchanged looks with Sir Roderick. Dragons breathing cold. Steel forged in song. Her brother's strange letters. Coincidence bred suspicion like mushrooms after rain. She faced Tyrion. "Did you have this book?" "No," he said. "But I've read enough to know when fools try to open doors best left closed. If your father still rides south, warn him. Lions and wolves may quarrel, but what stalks outside the walls swallows all houses." Roderick rose, jaw set to dire. "We will escort you to Moat Cailin for judgment. There Lord Stark will decide your path." Tyrion raised bound hands. "Better fetters than the bog." As guards lifted him from the litter, Arya saw blood smeared on the cushions, patterns jagged yet oddly deliberate, as though the cutthroats had finger-painted runes. She memorized their shape. Later, by campfire, she would draw them in dirt and realize they mirrored, crudely, the glyphs Bran scratched into letters Maester Luwin kept locked. The enemy was learning their script, too, though only children and ravens sang it fully yet. 3 days later, Bran crept through Winterfell's empty hall of armor. Moonlight poured through arrow loops. Glancing off helms and breastplates hung upon stands. He paused before the statue of an armored Stark lord so ancient the name plaque had worn smooth. At the statue's feet lay the oldest sword in the castle. Pitted, dull, useless to fight. Bran knelt. He touched the blade. Cold metal met his palm, but beneath it he felt warmth, faint as candle flame behind stone. The old steel murmured half-remembered chord, as though it once knew Dragonfire's kiss. Leaf stepped from behind a pillar. "The river drags at you, little Stark." He looked up. "The enemy learns the runes. They hunt the psalm. They hunt shadows of a truth they cannot grasp," she replied. "But shadows lengthen all the same." Bran rose, gripping the ancient sword two-handed. It felt both heavy and right. "Will this steel remember how to sing?" Leaf traced a finger along the corroded edge. "Sing to it and listen. If memory stirs, reforge." She met his eyes. "Do it soon." Bran nodded. Tomorrow he would bring the blade to Gendry. Tomorrow he would melt away centuries of rust. Tomorrow, yet dawn was hours off, and the river's current sped. He lifted the sword. In the moonlit hall, he began to hum the note of gray wind. It started low, a child's murmur, but grew till vaulted rafters quivered. Armor rattled on stands. Somewhere, far north, Jon Snow felt the crack in the wall stop widening. The cord held. The wall breathed. Bran's voice shaped the syllable of Frostleaf had taught him. then layered upon it the ember of rising heat. The sword shimmered, dulled surface reflecting stars that no roof revealed. Bran sang on, unbroken, until sweat ran cold under his tunic, and summer's distant howl joined in harmony. In that moment, the ancient steel's edge flickered blue, then died back to gray. But Bran felt it. Memory stirred. A seed of bright steel woken in the iron heart. He lowered the sword, breath ragged. Leaf offered a nod of approval. "One syllable spoken," she said. "Two remain." Bran sagged to his knees, gripping the hilt to keep upright. "Then we speak them. All. Before the horn blows anew." Atop the wall, dawn's first pale brushed the ice, staining Fisher's gold. Jon Snow braced his grin and Pip hauled a heavy anvil onto the parapet. The dragon steel blades lay ready, their surfaces gleaming despite meager light. Sam approached, carrying the letter Bran had sent, now creased from many readings. Jon positioned the longest blade over the crack, its point penetrating a finger's breadth. He nodded to Donal Noy, who hefted a hammer worn by years of battlesmithing at Storm's End. Jon inhaled and sang, not loudly but clear. The note Bran had named Grey Wind. It quavered in his throat. Uncertain. He sang again, firmer. The wall resonated, echoing faint across miles. Ghost raised his head and howled. Noy brought the hammer down. The strike rang like struck crystal. Ice dust exploded, shimmering in sunlight. Jon sang a third time, voice breaking into rawness. The crack hissed. Frost whitened the dragon steel to hoarfrost, then thawed, leaving the blade encased in glassy rivulets that hardened at once. The fissure sealed an inch. Again. Jon rasped. A second strike? A second song. The fissure closed another inch. Brothers watched wide-eyed. Once more, Jon ordered. Donal Noy swung. The blade sang. The note held. When silence returned, no crack remained, only a seam, barely visible beneath a sheath of frozen glass. Jon leaned against the parapet, trembling. The wall breathed out, a sigh so vast it bent torch flames. Somewhere below, the weirwood bundles caught spark unbidden, flames whooshing skyward in a sudden flare. Brothers shouted, leaping away. But Jon felt no fear. The wall was not burning. It was exhaling warmth born of ice. Steam swirled, rose, vanished. Sam clutched Jon's arm. "It listened," he whispered. Jon met Ghost's red eyes. It listened to Bran. They lowered the anvil, sheathed the sword. Jon looked north. Storm clouds still massed, but a gap opened where sunlight pierced, laying a pale road across the snow wastes. For an instant, he thought he saw forms retreating, figures in tattered cloaks melting into falling snow. The dark pressed back, but light had drawn blood. "We are not leaves in winter," Jon said softly. "We are the tree." Sam nodded, though fear still pinched his face. "Trees still burn," he reminded. "Not while roots run deep," Jon replied, recalling Bran's lessons of water and bark. He turned southward, mind racing. They had bought time. How long? Enough to forge new steel. Enough to sing the river into calm? He did not know. Yet, he knew who might. He would write Bran at once, brother to brother, seer to shield. The song would go on. In Winterfell's dawn, Bran stood with Gendry in the old forge house. The ancient blade lay red-hot on the anvil, centuries of rust sloughing away like dead skin in a furnace. Bran hummed a walnote under his breath, guiding the hammer's fall. Each blow raised sparks that drifted upward, coalescing into tiny embers of blue that did not die but clung, fluttering like living fireflies round the beam rafters. Leaf watched from the doorway, and Maester Luwin beyond her, quill forgotten in slack fingers. Catelyn Stark stepped in quietly, took in the scene, boy and smith shaping impossible metal under a humming roof, and did not speak until Gendry quenched the blade. Steam blossomed, and in that cloud Catelyn heard faint music, voices twining, half woman, half wolf. When the steam cleared, the sword shone silver blue, edge sharp enough to slice breath. Runes branched along the fuller, ancient trees, twin wolves, seven-pointed stars. Bran touched the blade as Gendry lifted it. The steel hummed like a tuning fork. Bran smiled, though tears welled. "One syllable fashioned," he whispered. "To remain." Catelyn stepped forward, voice soft, but steady. "My son," she said, "tell me of these syllables." So Bran did. He spoke of Frost's language and Fire's reply, of horns and hollow gates, of dragon steel and dream. He told her the great war could be unmade, not through swords drawn, but through songs entwined before swords must clash. Catelyn listened, hands trembling. When he finished, she kissed his brow. "Then we forge every note, son," she vowed. "And we sing." Bran closed his eyes. Through floor stones he felt the hot springs churn, awakened. Through rafters he felt winter wind hush, listening. Through miles north he felt the walls steady its breath. And far beyond even that, in mountains unnamed, a horn sat silent, hairline fractures knitting in the dawn, waiting. But not yet ready. Not yet. Bran opened his eyes and lifted the sword to the faint light creeping through the smithy door. Snowflakes drifted in, swirling around the blade without melting. Steel glimmered like captured sunrise. Winter still came, but in this hour, spring breathed within the song. Ah, Dei, and ya. A hush settled across the north, uncanny in its weight, as if all the land listened for something. News, omen, a promise kept or broken. The first wild geese passed low above Winterfell's towers, black sigils against the cold blue vault, but their call sounded muted, wary, as if the air itself feared to carry any secret too far. Bran felt that hush in the marrow of his bones as the days bled one into the next. He kept to the forge or the godswood, seldom the hall. His days a cycle of sweat and song, steel and frost, visions flickering in every shadow like the light behind eyelids. The sword they had made, Brightwolf, Gendry named it, though Bran never spoke the name, hung above the forge hearth, silver blue and quiet, the runes along its length shifting with the light, as if the blade remembered what it was to dream. Gendry worked beside Bran each day, arms and chest smudged with soot, eyes bright with hunger to master this craft he sensed was greater than any smith's lore. He learned to listen for the tremor in the steel, to match his hammer's rhythm to Bran's wordless hum. Sometimes Leaf would stand in the threshold, watching with that look of sorrow and pride that belonged to all who knew what it meant to lose a world and find a new one in the making. When dusk fell, Gendry slept like the dead, and Bran lingered, hands open above the coals, not for warmth but for the song that came faint as a child's laugh from the iron as it cooled. The second blade, the one Bran called Frostroot in silence, was not ready to be shaped. It lay swaddled in wolfskin, its surface mottled with ancient stains, waiting for a second syllable Bran had not yet spoken. The third, Dawn's Echo, remained hidden with Maester Luwin, who watched it as a dragon guards its egg, certain that knowledge and care were twin guards against folly. But time, Bran knew, moved at its own pace, like river ice breaking in the thaw. Slow, then all at once. It was on a night of high wind and sleet that the rhythm broke. A horn sounded on the road from White Harbor, low and wary. The portcullis creaked, men's voices echoed in the court, and then the call. Riders from the south, bearing royal livery. Bran was at the window before the words died. Summer's fur bunched in his fist. Gendry followed, hair tangled, boots half-laced. Together, they watched a procession of riders, mud-caked and travel-bowed, escorting a litter draped in banners that trailed crimson and gold through slush. The colors set Bran's skin crawling. Lannister red, Baratheon gold, and, yes, one pennant of blue and silver, the arms of House Arryn. Catelyn appeared behind Bran, her hand on his shoulder, gentle but rigid with tension. "What now?" she murmured, though she needed no answer. Bran's mind had already flown south, skimming through the skein of threads that tangled in the capital's shadow. He glimpsed Arya's wild face, half-frosted in sleet, Sansa's careful gaze, wary as a dew's. He saw Sir Roderick, beard rimed with cold, standing stiff beside the Stark banner as the Queen's retinue swept into Torrhen's Square. Most of all, he felt his father, Ned, moving through the corridors of King's Landing like a man wading a river in flood, every step uncertain, every current seeking to drag him down. The war Bran feared had not yet begun, but the world was narrowing to a blade's edge. Catelyn's grip tightened. "We must greet them, Bran. Come." He followed her into the hall, where the banners of Winterfell hung limp in the damp. Servants scurried, the hearth roared. But the mood was strained, voices low. By the time Bran and his mother reached the courtyard, Maester Luwin and Sir Roderick stood ready to receive the royal messenger. The man dismounted in a clatter of mail, face drawn, eyes darting from snow to stone to the wolf at Bran's side. He produced a scroll, its seal unbroken. By order of His Grace, King Robert Baratheon, Lord of the Seven Kingdoms, Protector of the Realm, to Lady Catelyn Stark of Winterfell. His voice rang with ritual, but the cold and fear inside it could not be disguised. Catelyn broke the seal. The wind plucked at the parchment as she read, her eyes narrowing, her lips thinning. Bran studied her face for meaning. Fear, hope, resolve. At last, she handed the letter to Luwin, whose face darkened. "The king is dead," Luwin whispered, the words shocking in their finality. "Ned Stark is named traitor, accused of plotting against the crown. Queen Cersei rules in her son's name, and Lord Tywin musters hosts west and south. War comes." The word war sent a tremor through the courtyard. Sir Roderick's jaw clenched. The guards shifted, hands tightening on spears. The Lannister banners, gaudy in the torchlight, looked to Bran like flames licking at the doors. He stepped forward, his voice carrying farther than he intended. "Tell your mistress this is not her kingdom. Tell her the North remembers." The messenger swallowed, eyes darting to Summer, who bared teeth in silent promise. "I deliver only what is written, my lord," he managed, bowing. Catelyn drew herself up, as tall and regal as any queen. "You will have shelter tonight," she told the riders. "But tomorrow you ride. Take our reply south. The North will not kneel to threats." "Mend." The man bowed again, grateful, and was led away. The court dissolved into hurried whispers, the news moving through Winterfell like wildfire through dry grass. Bran and Catelyn returned inside. He knew what she would say before she said it. "You must rest, Bran. You and Robb both. War will not wait for dreams." He nodded, but he knew that rest would not come. In his bones, the river pulsed, the wall breathed, and the shadows beyond the mountains began to stir. Robb rode hard for Winterfell 2 days later, the wind at his back and dread burning in his heart. Bran felt his brother's approach before word arrived, his presence a warm light flaring northward in Bran's dreams. Robb came with a column of men, Karstarks, Umbers, Manderleys, banners snapping, armor grim with road dust. He found Bran waiting in the great hall, Summer at his side, the old sword Bright Wolf displayed above the hearth, blue fire flickering in the runes. They embraced, hard and wordless, the way brothers do who have seen too much too young. Robb was taller now, face sharper, eyes haunted by days spent riding south, parleying with men twice his age, making decisions for which there were no good answers. "Mother said you've changed," Robb said, voice low. "I see it now. There's something in your eyes, Bran." Bran shrugged, the gesture oddly adult. "I see things, Robb. Things that haven't happened yet, or won't if we are clever." Robb frowned. "You mean dreams?" Bran shook his head. "Dreams, and more. I know where the next threat comes from. I know the wall must be watched, the blades reforged, the old songs sung again. Neonita." Robb stared at Bright Wolf, and something in his face shifted, skepticism warring with hope. "And if I ask you how to win this war, will you give me an answer?" Bran looked at the sword, then back to Robb. "Don't fight it, Robb. Not yet. Hold the passes, strengthen the castles, keep the north whole. But don't ride south unless the wall falls. If you must ride, ride to Moat Cailin, not River Run. And send word to the Eyrie, the true battle is not in the Riverlands or at King's Landing, but at the wall." Robb bristled. "Father is in chains. Worse, he may be dead. The lords expect blood for blood." Bran's voice was flat and cold. "If you march now, you will lose half the north, and Cersei will sit easy. If you hold, you will keep your father alive, and give Jon time at the wall." Robb searched Bran's face, found something that steadied him. He nodded, slow, as if weighing each word against a lifetime's training. "We hold then," he said at last. "But the lords must be convinced. You must help me, Bran." "Nidsterand." "I will," Bran promised. "But we must move the second blade before the next moon. There is a shadow on the ice, and if we fail, all these choices become ash." Robb squeezed his shoulder. "I'll do what I can, but you, keep watching. If the dead walk, the living must stand together." Bran watched his brother go, feeling the gravity of a world in balance, each soul a stone in the river, each choice rippling outward. Jon Snow stood on the wall, the wind a knife in his teeth, ghost pressed at his side. The fissure they had mended held, its glassy seam gleaming with frozen starlight under the waxing moon. The old bear had written south, warning sent by every fast bird and crow. The men of the watch were uneasy, but the wall's new song, a deep humming resonance, seemed to hearten them, a promise that they were not alone. Sam Tarly sat on a barrel by Jon's side, shivering but intent, a battered book open on his knees. "You're sure Bran meant to strike 3 times?" he asked. Jon nodded. 3 is the old magic, Sam. 3 breaths, 3 blades, 3 notes in a song. We've done the first. The others, Bran will send word when it's time. "Madden." Sam nodded, eyes darting to the east, where the moonlight shivered on snowfields stretching to the horizon. "They say the dead gather in the frost fangs. Men go out and do not return." Jon felt it too, the press of unseen eyes, the prickle of danger. "We are not ready," he said. "But we will be. Bran has a plan." Sam smiled, one and small. "You trust him?" "With my life," Jon said simply. They stood together, 2 boys atop a wall of ice, feeling the world shift beneath their feet. South in King's Landing, Sansa Stark sat in a chamber that was not hers. The city's night song drifting through the lattice, shouts, laughter, the distant clang of a smith's hammer. She fingered the letter Bran had sent her, words in a hand she barely recognized, the lines shaped in both common and the old glyphs. "Remember the song, Sansa Dada. Sing the old words when the queen's shadow falls long. Tell the boy with golden hair to mind of a wolf's eyes." She did not understand, not fully, but she felt the urgency, the strangeness, the truth in it. And so, when Queen Cersei summoned her the next morning, her smile all teeth, her touch all claws, Sansa did what Bran had told her. She spoke softly of the north, of wolves and snows, of old songs and new beginnings. She watched Joffrey's eyes, bright and cruel, and she did not look away when they landed on her. She told the truth, in the way only those who carry secrets can. Half hidden, half song, never quite a lie, but never the whole truth either. It was enough. For that day, at least, Sansa survived. She sent a letter north, written in her own hand, but folded with 3 blue petals from the garden, a signal Bran would understand. The queen watched her write, but did not see the petals, or the fear in Sansa's trembling fingers. In the Frostfangs, the masked figure who had sounded the horn stood at the edge of a precipice, watching the dark river below. The horn was fractured now, its voice broken, but its power bled out in waves. Around him, the whites gathered, silent and patient, their blue eyes fixed on the wall's distant glow. He lifted the horn, pressed his lips to its cold rim, and blew. No sound came, but the clouds above writhed, and the snow began to fall faster, harder, a blizzard lashing south. The arch in the air shimmered, a door half open, half shut. He stepped through, vanishing into the storm. Back at Winterfell, Bran felt the world shudder. The pond in the Godswood rippled, then stilled. Leaf appeared at his side, her face drawn, her eyes the green of storm-struck grass. "It has begun," she whispered. Bran nodded. "The horn will blow thrice before the end. We have 1 blade, 1 note. We must shape the second, and soon." "Now." Leaf knelt beside him, hands pressed to the earth. The frostroot blade must be cooled in water from the black pond. At the hour the moon is swallowed by cloud. Only then will it hold the second syllable. Bran did not question. He rose, summoned Gendry and Maester Luwin, and together they fetched the blade from its wolfskin sheath. The three of them worked as the storm howled outside. Bran sang the note Leaf taught him, low and steady, his voice shaking the coals. Gendry hammered, sweat freezing on his brow, every blow guided by the rhythm of Bran's chant. Luwin poured the pond water slowly, and the blade hissed and smoked, its surface frosting over with a sheen of living ice. When Gendry struck the final blow, the sword rang, a note high, bright, and cold as dawn. The runes along its length flared blue, then faded to silver. Bran felt the second syllable settle into the whirl. Outside, the wind eased. Summer bayed in triumph, his voice rolling over the walls, answered by distant wolves in the wood. They named the blade Frostroot, though Bran knew its true name was Older, a word no man had spoken in centuries. The days that followed moved in strange double time, too slow for the war brewing in the south, too fast for the old magics waking in the north. The Wall's song changed again, deeper and clearer. Messages came from Jon. The dead were moving, but the Wall still held. The old bear sent ravens to every lord and king, pleading for aid, for wisdom, for dragonsteel and fire. Robb met with his lords in Winterfell's hall, their voices rising in argument, but always Bran's counsel held sway. They sent men to Moat Cailin, to White Harbor, to the mountains and the marshes, but they did not ride south. They watched and waited and built their strength, while the blades were shaped, and the old songs learned anew. Catelyn rode to Riverrun, to the Eyrie, to Stannis at Dragonstone, weaving warnings in every line. Arya learned secrets from Tyrion Lannister, whom Ser Roderick had delivered safely to Moat Cailin, about the tunnels beneath King's Landing, the spies and the gold cloaks, the poisons brewed for those who would not bend the knee. She sent these north, hidden in riddles and rhymes only Bran would decipher. In the dead of night, Bran returned to the Godswood, the two blades, Bright Wolf and Frostroot, slung across his back. He sat by the pond, Leaf beside him, Summer at his feet. The moon hid behind a cloud, the world hushed and waiting. "Are you ready?" Leaf asked. Bran nodded. He dipped the tip of Bright Wolf into the pond, then Frostroot. The water did not freeze but shimmered, 1,000 sparks dancing along the surface. Bran sang the first syllable, then the second. Leaf joined him, her voice winding round his. The harmony strange and deep. The runes on both blades shone, light rising from their cores. Bran felt the wall tremble, then settle, the song echoing outward. Somewhere, far beyond the mountains, the masked figure paused, head cocked as if hearing a bell in a dream. "Now the third," Leaf whispered. "But not yet. The last syllable belongs to dawn. When the sun rises over ice and all seems lost, then you will sing. Hold the blade high and call every name you know, wolf, dragon, man, child. Only then will the world turn. Mender Mal." Bran shivered, but nodded. The river ran faster now. He could feel it in every heartbeat, every breath. In King's Landing, Sansa slipped a final letter to the Maester of the Eyrie. The Queen watched her go, smiling, satisfied. But Sansa's eyes were clear and cold, her voice steady as steel. The petals she pressed into the fold were blue and white and silver, Winterfell's colors, the sign for help, for hope for the North to stand. Jon Snow knelt by the wall, the dragonsteel blade Bright Wolf in hand, the crack sealed but not forgotten. He felt Bran's song vibrating in the hilt, a warmth that promised spring even in the heart of winter. Ghost pressed close, red eyes fixed north. The others were coming, Jon knew. The dead marched, and only the living stood between the world and the night. He looked south, then north, and whispered to the wind, "We're ready, Bran. Send your song." None. And in Winterfell, Bran heard him. He closed his eyes and reached out, across rivers and hills, across snowfields and walls of ice, across years and fears and dreams. He sang, not just with his voice, but with his heart, his blood, his roots. He sang of wolves and wind, of home and hope, of the river that runs forever, but can always be changed by the smallest stone. And for a moment, as the first dawn broke the long night, the world listened, and was not afraid. A.K.I.E. The dawn that followed carried a thin promise, as fragile as hoarfrost on a branch. Winterfell's stones glimmered, crusted white, but the sky above ran pale, almost spring-like in its clarity. A deception, Bran thought, for the air still held winter's teeth. He lay awake long after the light crept over the sill, listening to the castle's slow stirrings, servants clattering in kitchens, the caw of a raven, the muted thud of Gendry's hammer starting early in the forge. Summer stretched at his side, wolf breath clouding in the chilly chamber, golden eyes watchful for threats seen and unseen. Bran sat up, drawing his knees close, and watched the pattern of sunlight chase itself across the rushes. There were 3 blades now, Bright Wolf, Frostroot and Dawn's Echo, each hidden in plain sight, each bearing runes that pulsed when Bran brushed them with his gaze. No one but Gendry, Maester Luwin, and Leaf seemed to notice that the swords hummed at night, their song carried into the deepest cellars and up the oldest towers, settling into the bones of the castle like the roots of the weirwood. Robb and Catelyn listened too, though in them the music stoked unease. It was not the sound of steel alone, but something older, a power that bent the future as surely as a sword bent a foe's will. The storm that battered the wall and roared down from the Frostfangs scattered riders and ravens alike. For 3 days no word came from the Night's Watch, no message from Jon. The silence pressed on Winterfell with increasing weight. Every time a new bird winged in from the white, the hope in Bran's chest flickered, then dimmed. Gendry poured all his nerves into the forge, beating plowshares and hinges until his arms shook. Robb drilled with the men on the yard, but his eyes strayed northward more often than not. Arya, still stranded in Moat Cailin with Roderick and Tyrion, sent word of suspicious travelers near the neck, men with strange marks burned into their palms, not thieves or sellswords, but something else. Sansa wrote from King's Landing with riddles and coded scraps, blue petals pressed into every fold, her courage a quiet flame in the heart of the Lannister den. On the 3rd night, Bran stood in the Godswood with Leaf. The pool was black, wind rippled, the old faces in the trees watching him as they always did. He felt the press of all the north behind him, history breathing through moss and root, and he tried to remember how the world had once seemed small, safe, bounded by walls and parents' promises. Now the world was wide and all its edges bled shadow. "The horn has sounded twice," Leaf said, her voice carrying the chill of old snows. "The storm breaks the 3rd silence. Are you ready?" Bran nodded. His mouth was dry. "The blades are forged, the words learn. But I'm afraid, Leaf. I'm only a boy." She reached out, laying her tiny hand on his. "Once, every seer was a child, before they found the voice of the river. You see more clearly than most. Use that sight. When the darkness comes, you must speak for all who cannot." Bran swallowed, nodding. In the black water he saw the reflection of his face, older than it should be, marked with lines worry had carved. Summer nudged his side, a low growl in his throat, as if to remind Bran that he was not alone. They stood together, waiting, until the wind changed and the sky to the north pulsed with a shimmer of green and blue, a false dawn, unnatural, spreading fast. Bran gasped. "The wall is singing," he said. Leaf looked north, her face grave. "The last note is coming. When it does, you must answer with your own song, or the river will flood its banks." Bran bowed his head. He listened, not with his ears, but with all his heart, for the note that would tell him it was time. Jon Snow could not sleep, not even when exhaustion pressed on him like a mountain of ice. He patrolled the wall's length with Ghost at his heels, his boots crunching in fresh-blown drifts. Above him, the aurora veiled the stars, green fire twisting like the ghosts of slain kings. The wall's new seam gleamed, as if it too caught and reflected the light, and whenever Jon's shadow fell across it, he felt something stir beneath the ice. A living thing, restless, hungry. The old bear paced the courtyard below, muttering with Sir Jeremy and Maester Aemon. Ravens fluttered and cawed, their message tubes empty. Every bird sent south in recent days, lost to the storm or vanished without trace. The watch had fewer and fewer men to send out for news. Those who returned came back with wild tales. Whole villages empty, shapes seen at dusk, children dreaming of blue fires and waking with frost in their hair. At the second hour past midnight, Jon was halfway between the east and west towers when the wall trembled beneath his feet. It was not a crack this time, but a shudder, as if some beast beneath the ice had stirred from a long slumber. Ghost bristled, teeth bared. The song began again, 3 notes, each deeper than the last, echoing from the world's end. Jon knelt, pressing his hand to the wall. He felt the song reverberate through bone and marrow. The shape of Bran's chant but changed. Darkened, twisted, interrupted by the pulse of a second power. He turned to Ghost. "Go," he whispered. "Find the breach." The direwolf bounded into the dark. Jon ran after, boots skidding. Brothers shouted below. Bells rang. As Jon reached the center of the wall's length, he saw it. A ribbon of blackness yawning open in the ice, cold mist pouring from its depths. Shapes shuffled in the gap. Human, but not men. Their eyes blue as glacier light. "Hold the wall," Jon roared, voice high and clear. "To arms, to arms." Archers loosed. Steel rang. The first of the dead poured out, more than had ever been seen. Hundreds, thousands, stumbling over the stones. Brothers of the Night's Watch formed ranks, torches flaring, axes lifted high. Jon drew Brightwolf, the blade pulsing with power, and raised it overhead. "Remember your oaths," he shouted. "Remember the living." He sang the first syllable Bran had taught him, the note of gray wind, and the blade flared blue. He struck the ice beside the breach, once, twice, 3 times. The wall shuddered, the breach shrinking as the song wove through the stones. The dead howled, recoiling, their blue eyes winking out. But there were too many. The crack widened, the song faltered. Jon felt darkness rise, swallowing his courage. He gritted his teeth, singing louder, the second syllable shaping his cry. The wall answered, frost and fire spiraling together. He saw Bran's face in memory, calm, determined, a boy made old by wisdom. Then, from the storm, came a new voice. Sam, chanting words from the old books, his face pale but brave. Brothers joined, voices rising. The wall's song built, echoing Bran's in the far north. Brightwolf blazed, casting shadows on the ice. The dead retreated, screaming, but Jon knew it was only a respite. The horn had sounded thrice. The last note was yet to come. In Winterfell, Bran woke from sleep as if struck by lightning. He heard Jon's cry, saw through Ghost's eyes the horror pouring from the wall, felt the surge of the old power rising. He leaped from bed, grabbed the 3 blades, and ran for the Godswood, Summer at his heels. Leaf was waiting. "Now," she said, "speak the song. Sing the 3rd note, the syllable of dawn. Call every name." Bran knelt by the black pond, the blades before him, his heart thundering. He pressed the sword's tips into the water, feeling the cold bite, the heat from the steel. He closed his eyes, letting the visions come. He saw the north as the birds see. The forests, the rivers, the mountains, the frozen wall. A thread of white at the edge of the world, breaking, mending, breaking again. He saw his father, in chains but alive, whispering prayers to the old gods. He saw Robb, sword raised, holding back his bannermen from blood. He saw Arya in the neck, fighting shadows with shadow. He saw Sansa at court, words sharper than any blade. He saw Jon, standing alone at the breach, singing his brother's song as the world trembled. Bran drew a deep breath. He began to chant. The first note, the song of root and wolf. The second, the song of frost and water. The third, the song of dawn, of hope, of the first sunrise after the longest night. He called every name. Father, mother, brother, sister, friend, foe, living, dead. He called the names of the children of the forest, of the first men, of the direwolves. The old kings, the smiths who forged the blades, the women who sung the stones awake. His voice grew until it was no longer a boy's, but the rivers, the forests, the mountains, the song of the north itself. The blades hummed. The water blazed white gold. The song leapt from the pond to the roots, to the castle stones, through the earth, over hills, under rivers, across the leagues of snow and ice, to the breach in the wall where Jon knelt, exhausted. At the wall, the sky burst open with light, brighter than the sun, bathing the dead in fire and frost. The breach sealed with a shudder that shook the wall from end to end. The dead shrieked, staggered back, and where the light touched them, they melted, turning to water, to snow, to nothing at all. Jon struggled to his feet. He saw the light pass through him, filling him with strength. The sword in his hand was weightless, ageless, a piece of the world itself. Sam wept, bowing his head. Ghost howled, a sound of joy and sorrow together. The living men of the watch pressed forward, torches blazing. Where the dead fled, the wall's shadow followed, closing every gap, sealing every wound. The masked figure in the storm turned, feeling the power wane, his command crumbling. He lifted the horn, but it shattered in his hands, its shards melting to slush. Jon raised his sword in salute, eyes searching the northern sky, and for a moment he thought he saw a boy standing by a pool in a forest, smiling, surrounded by wolves and trees older than time. The vision faded, but the peace remained. Bran collapsed, breathless, into Leaf's arms. The blades cooled, their song lingering. Summer curled around him, protective. The godswood felt alive, every tree singing, every root whispering gratitude. Leaf smoothed Bran's hair. "It is done," she said softly. "The wall holds. The great war is ended before it began." Bran opened his eyes. "There will still be battles. Cersei will not rest. Robb must rule. Jon will need friends." Leaf smiled. "The river flows, but you have changed its course. The future is yours, not the darkness. The children of men will remember." Bran nodded, too tired for words. He listened to the quiet, the soft lap of water, the distant howl of wolves. For the first time since his fall, he felt no fear. The months that followed were a season of healing. Word spread. The dead had risen and been banished. The wall's power was restored, the threat broken. Jon became a legend. His brothers singing songs of the night the world nearly ended. Sam's books were revered, his knowledge prized. The North held together, Robb's leadership unchallenged. Sansa's letters bringing help from the Vale and the Eyrie. Arya's riddles were sung from Moat Cailin to White Harbor, warnings against the old shadows. Catelyn wrote to Ned in his cell, sending hope and word of their children's courage. Tyrion was ransomed, his information and loyalty winning him a new place at Robb's council, as the war that might have torn the North in two faded, replaced by something new. A unity forged not by fear, but by the memory of near disaster. Bran remained in Winterfell, but his legend grew. Some said he was a seer, others a sorcerer. He cared for neither. He knew only that the river had shifted, that the world breathed easier, and that his family was whole. He visited the godswood often, speaking to the trees, the roots, the ghosts. Leaf stayed until the snows melted, then vanished, leaving only a woven ring of branches beside the pool. Gendry forged swords for those who needed them, never again shaping magic, but every blade carried a whisper of Bright Wolf's song. Summer grew old, but never left Bran's side. The wolf's eyes held wisdom and love, and Bran's heart remained open to every voice, every vision. He dreamed, and his dreams were gentle. One night, many years later, Bran stood alone in the godswood, the pond still and glassy, reflecting a sky jeweled with stars. He pressed his hand to the oldest tree, feeling the world's pulse steady and sure. "We did it," he whispered. The wind stirred, the leaves shivered, and far away, a wolf howled. Bran closed his eyes, listening, not just for danger, but for peace, for hope, for the song of life itself. The wall stood. The darkness was held at bay, and the North remembered. The story, for now, was at peace. Aye. The long winter was not ended, but in its heart a softer season began to pulse. A hush like thaw water running beneath ice, unseen but everywhere. With the wall sealed and the dead driven back beyond the reach of living men, the Old North seemed to draw a deeper breath. At Winterfell, snow still fell, sometimes blinding and bitter, but the great castle was warm as it had not been in years. The hot springs steamed in the vaults, the kitchens bustled, and in the halls where Bran wheeled quietly past the pillars, the shadows felt thinner, as if the walls themselves remembered sunlight and laughter. Bran had grown used to the new world's strange attention, the way even old guards nodded, half in awe, when he passed, or how lordlings from as far as White Harbor came seeking the Seer of Winterfell to ask questions about omens, fortunes, and the truth of dreams. He answered little, less out of secrecy than because so much he saw slipped away as soon as it arrived. A river of images, some already unspooling into the future, others looping endlessly in the pool of the godswood. He returned to that sacred place every day. There the great heart tree bled fresh sap into the snow, and the black pond, for all its mystery, had become a comfort, a fixed point in his ever-shifting sense of what was real. Sometimes, sitting beneath the red branches, Bran would see Joan's face in the water, or Robb's at council, or Sansa's as she read in the light of the solar. Sometimes he saw strangers, men and women yet unknown, their faces shaped by fate's slow hand. He watched, always, for shadows gathering in places where even sunlight faltered, and for the great pulse of the wall, which still called to him with its icy song. The story of the breach, and the singing that sealed it, spread as stories do, distorted, embroidered, turning truth into myth with every telling. By spring, men at White Harbor swore the wall had flared like sunrise, that all the Night's Watch chanted together in a language known only to the gods, and that the North's dead wolves had risen to chase the others back into the void. Some tales made Jon Snow a giant who strode the wall's crest, wielding a blade that burned like the sun. Others claimed Bran himself stood atop Winterfell's tallest tower, eyes rolled white, commanding the wind and snow to obey. Bran smiled at such stories, and let them pass. What mattered was that the world had changed, and that a war had ended without most men ever knowing how close they'd come to the dark. But not all wars were ended. The Southern lords marched and countermarched, old rivalries flaring, new alliances knotted in the shadow of King's Landing's broken court. Ned Stark's captivity stretched into weeks, then months. Robb's council at Winterfell was never at rest, and Catelyn moved from room to room with a letter or a worry always in her hand. One night, as Bran waited in the godswood, Catelyn came to him, wrapped in a heavy cloak. She looked older, Bran thought, but stronger too, her grief tempered by the steel of purpose. "You don't eat with us anymore, Bran," she said, settling beside him on a half-buried root. He shook his head, smiling slightly. "I eat," he said, "just not when the hall is full." She sighed. "I suppose the talk grows wearying." "It isn't the talk," he said. "It's the noise. When people are afraid, they make so much noise that I can't hear anything else." She stroked his hair, thoughtful. "We're all afraid. Even Robb. Even your mother." She hesitated. "What do you see when you look at me, Bran?" He thought for a moment, trying to separate the hundreds of images the godswood showed him from the simple shape of his mother's face. "I see you," he said finally. "But I see other things too. I see you at River Run, holding my hand by the water. I see you lighting a candle for Father. I see you riding south across rivers I don't know, to find something, someone, lost." He hesitated. "I see you weeping sometimes, but not for Father. For me. For the world." She was silent for a long time. Then she kissed his brow, as she had when he was small. "Thank you, Bran. I wish I understood more of what you see, but I trust you. I trust what you did, what you are." He looked down at his lap, embarrassed. "I'm just a boy," he whispered. She laughed softly. "So was your father once. So was Robb. The world doesn't wait for us to be grown." Naya won. They sat together until the wind shifted, the snow settling gentle as ash on their cloaks. When Catelyn left, Bran felt stronger, as if the words had woven a shield around his heart. The days grew longer, the sky less oppressive. At Castle Black, Jon Snow led men along the wall, shoring up weak spots, training new recruits. He sent word as often as crows would allow. Tales of the dead still lurking in the wilds, but afraid to cross the wall's new-formed scars. A free folk massing beyond the Milkwater, restless and uneasy in their own lands. Ghost, ever at Jon's side, patrolled the heights, his white coat nearly invisible against the snow. Jon's letters were blunt, but honest. Bran felt his brother's tension in every line. The weight of command, the memory of that night, the knowledge that one mistake could break the world open again. He replied with all he could offer. Reminders of the old words, advice learned in dreams. He told Jon to keep the glass candles burning at night, to set guards not just at the gates, but along the wall's highest walks. He warned that, if the breach opened once more, the song must be sung again. But that the third note was not to be used lightly. "It is not a spell, Jon," Bran wrote, "but a promise. If you sing it when you do not mean it, the wall may never answer again." Jon never wrote back of his dreams. But in every letter, Bran found a scrap of wolf's fur, or a pressed leaf, or a line from some story old Nan once told. It was enough. Robb ruled Winterfell with a steady hand, but the council wore on him. Lords came with their banners, their demands, their private grievances. Ser Rodrik managed the day-to-day, but the big decisions fell to Robb. Bran saw how tired he was, how sometimes he looked at the sword Brightwolf hanging above the hearth, as if it was a burden more than a weapon. One evening, Bran joined Robb and Gendry in the yard, where the smith was showing the young lord how to test a blade's balance. Gendry handed Robb the newly finished longsword, and Robb took a few awkward swings, grunting at the weight. "It's too light," Robb said. "No northern blade should feel like a reed." Gendry shrugged. "Light is fast, fast wins." Bran grinned. "The best blade is the one you trust." Robb sheathed the sword, looking from one boy to the other. "Is that what you see, Bran? Blades and trust?" Bran hesitated. "I see that it matters who holds the sword. And why." Robb looked away. "I'm not father. I'm not even sure I'm myself anymore." Bran wheeled closer, his voice quiet. "You are Robb Stark. That's enough. The rest, the lord, the king, the soldier, they're just masks. The wolves know your name, even if men forget it." Gendry laughed. "I wouldn't mind being a wolf." "Seems simpler." Bran smiled, but his eyes were far away. Wolves dream too. They stood together as the sun set, three boys on the edge of manhood, knowing that the world was watching, and that every choice now shaped more than their own fates. The Southern War smoldered. In King's Landing, Sansa survived by wits and courtesy, passing messages in flowers and half-remembered songs. Arya, still in the neck, sent rumors of Lannister outriders and sellsword bands wandering the woods, searching for secrets only the Starks seemed to know. Tyrion, safely north, became Robb's unlikely advisor, using his wit and gold to keep the houses of the North united, or at least wary of betraying each other. Every letter from the south brought news of Cersei's intrigues, of Stannis brooding on Dragonstone, of the Reach growing restless, of Dorne's silence. Riverrun held for now, but the Riverlands were a tinderbox. Robb's choice to remain at Winterfell, to defend the north and wait, was unpopular with some lords. But the story of the Wall, of the Seer child who saved the world, had power. Even those who doubted were wary of crossing the wolf's path. One night, as the council debated news of a Lannister army moving west, Bran slipped from the hall and found himself wandering the empty crypts below Winterfell. The air was cold and still, the only sound the slow drip of water from somewhere deep in the earth. He passed the tombs of kings long dead, their stone wolves watching. He paused at his father's empty niche, the name freshly carved, though the body was far away. Bran touched the cold stone, and for a moment saw not the crypt but a green field, a bright river, the sun on a girl's hair. He closed his eyes, reaching for the river of time. It came, slow at first, then all at once, carrying memories and warnings. He saw Caitlin crossing a bridge under banners of red and blue. He saw a raven flying, burdened by a secret. He saw a hand, pale and thin, dropping a ring into a cup of wine. He saw John on the wall, watching stars fall, his face grave. He saw Arya, her blade drawn in darkness, her eyes filled with purpose. He saw Sansa, standing at a window, singing softly to herself. He opened his eyes. "Not yet," he whispered. "None of this is said. We can still change the story." He wheeled back to the hall, mind filled with shapes and possibilities. He would warn Robb. He would write to Sansa. He would find a way to reach Arya. The river had taught him this much. Even when the world seemed unbending, the smallest act could shift the current. And sometimes, what you saw was not fate, but a choice. The spring came late and sudden, the snow receding in a single week, crocuses blooming along the walls, and the wind carrying scents from as far as the sea. The river at Winterfell broke its ice, and the people crowded the banks to watch. Bran watched too from the godswood, summer sprawled beside him, the sunlight gilding the wolf's fur. It was then that the first birds arrived from the south, not crows, but doves, each bearing a different seal. One was from River Run, one from the Eyrie, one from Dragonstone. They brought tidings of war. Stannis had moved. Cersei's hold weakened, the veil in arms, Dorne silent no longer. But one letter, marked with a seal Bran did not know, brought something else. A question. It was written in a hand old but steady. To Bran Stark of Winterfell. I have heard it said you see what others do not, and that you save the wall from breaking. I ask you, if you see the world unmade, do you also see it remade? What hope do we have for peace? Signed, Maester Marwyn Oldtown. Bran read the letter 3 times, then took up his quill. He wrote back, "Peace is not something I see, Maester. It is something I choose every day. If enough people choose it, perhaps the river will run that way. If not, well, even a river cuts through stone, given time." He sealed the reply and sent it with the fastest bird. When the dove vanished into the blue, Bran felt a weight lift. Someone, somewhere, was listening. That was enough. The week slipped by, each day a mix of worry and routine, danger and joy. Bran continued his rituals. The godswood at dawn, the hall at noon, the ramparts at dusk. Sometimes he saw Leaf. Sometimes he dreamed of her. Sometimes Gendry would ask for help with a difficult piece of metalwork. Or Arya would send a riddle by letter. Or Sansa would request a story. The blades hung above the hearth, untouched, gleaming, waiting for need. And always Bran listened. To the wall, to the wind, to the river, to the quiet voice in his own heart. He learned that seeing was not the same as knowing, and that even the greatest visions faded, if not spoken aloud. He spoke then to anyone who would listen, of the power of mercy, of the danger of pride, of the need for unity. Some called him wise, others mad. But the words traveled, and in time even lords who hated each other began to sit together, if only to hear what the seer would say. Slowly the north healed, not because the magic held it together, but because people did. Bran's part was only to see what was possible and to remind them it was within reach. When the next winter came, it was not as bitter as the last. The wall stood. The dead did not rise. The north remembered, but it did not fear. And in Winterfell, under the watchful eyes of the old gods, a boy who had seen too much sat by a pond and listened, and was content. The world remade hummed with a quieter, deeper song. The story, once one of war and shadow, became one of peace, a peace chosen, not given, and held, not by force, but by the courage of those willing to dream a new future into being. Ka. High summer burned over the north, and for the first time in many years, the fields north of Winterfell shone gold instead of white. Rivers ran swift and full, cutting through land thawed by the long memory of cold. The wallflowers bloomed on the battlements, and laughter drifted on the air. Children splashing in the shallows, and kitchen maids singing as they hung fresh rushes in the halls. Even the ravens seemed to fly with less urgency, their shadows trailing softly over the bright courtyards, no longer hurrying warnings of death and dark from one end of the realm to the other. Bran watched the change in his own way, through window and root, and the flight of birds. In his dreams, the pulse of the world was less troubled now. The wall still sang to him, a deep, cold song, but steady, sure, no longer shaking with the dread that once pulsed from its heart. Sometimes the old songs tried to return, but Bran would reach out in his sleep, touch the ice and the stone with his mind, and the melody would shift, gentle as a mother's hush. Robb ruled Winterfell and the North with steady hands, though he was older than his years now, shoulders burdened with memory. His bannermen gathered in the new hall, a broad, sunlit room Robb had ordered built to remind all that the North had survived not by turning inward, but by coming together. Tyrion Lannister sat at Robb's right more often than not, sometimes arguing with Lord Manderley, sometimes playing dice with the Umbers, sometimes simply listening, his sharp mind drinking in every secret, every whisper. When the council grew heated, it was often Bran who ended the bickering. A word spoken softly, a memory of what the wall had been, or a reminder that peace, like winter, needed tending. Catelyn spent her days weaving and her nights writing. She wrote to Sansa in the capital, to Arya in the Neck, to River Run, to Dragonstone, to the Eyrie. Her words a lifeline, threading all corners of the realm. Sansa sent stories back, little victories, moments of mercy, songs sung at dusk. Arya sent riddles, tales of strangers in the marshes, of dangers averted and old oaths honored. Bran treasured each letter, reading them in the quiet of the Godswood, feeling his sister's courage like a lamp against the dark. Maester Luvain aged gently, his days filled with scrolls and lessons, his nights with the care of the glass candle, which he burned not for magic but for hope. Gendry's forge rang bright and true, not with songs of power but with the honest music of daily need. Sickles and spades, horseshoes and hinges, every piece hammered into shape by hands that had once helped shape the fate of the world. The three swords, Bright Wolf, Frostrude, and Dawn's Echo, remained on display above the hearth, their runes sometimes winking in the firelight. Warriors from far and wide came to look, some to boast, some to pray, some just to stare, silent, as if the blades themselves held the memory of that long night. Bran touched them rarely now, and only in silence. He no longer dreamed of battles or the shadowed arch beyond the wall. In his dreams he saw green hills, flowing rivers, a boy and his wolf running forever beneath the open sky. One afternoon, as the sun slanted golden over the Godswood, Bran wheeled his chair beneath the heart tree and watched the pond shimmer with dragonflies. Summer padded quietly behind, his muzzle flecked with gray, his eyes wise and warm. The wolf lay at Bran's feet, sighing contentedly. Leaf stepped from the trees, silent as wind over grass. She was older too, though not as men counted years. Her hair was threaded with white, and her eyes, once bright as new leaves, had deepened to the green of moss after rain. "Are you content, little Stark?" she asked. Bran nodded. For now. Leaf sat beside him, her slender hands cupped around her knees. "The river is quiet, but it never sleeps." Bran understood. "I watch, but there is less to fear now. The wall holds. The world is healing." Nantisat. Leaf tilted her head, studying him with a look that was both pride and sorrow. Even in peace, old wounds ache. The children remember. The wolves remember. And men forget, in time. "I won't forget," Bran said. Leaf smiled, sad and bright. "That is your gift. And your burden." They sat in silence, watching a squirrel dart along the roots, the sun dappling its back. Bran closed his eyes and listened, not with ears, but with the strange sense that bound him to the world. He felt the busy lives of the castle, the steady strength of the wall, the far-off laughter of Arya in some southern glade. Sansa's voice raised in song among the courtiers, Jon's measured tread along the battlements. The river of time ran on, unhurried. For a little while, at least there was peace. Summer faded, as seasons do. The first chill rains of autumn swept over the north, painting the leaves red and gold. With the change came new worries, a failed harvest in the barrows, bandits harrying the White Knife, Rumors from the south of new war brewing as rival claimants pressed against the shaken throne. But the north was strong, and the memory of the winter held them close. Robb called his banners less often now, trusting his lords to keep their peace. Instead, he rode the hills with Bran, or hunted in the woods, or watched the first snows from the tower with his mother. Sometimes, when dusk fell, he joined Bran in the Godswood, and the two brothers would speak quietly of the future. "Will there be another war?" Robb asked one night, staring into the pond. "Perhaps," Bran answered. "The river runs as it will, but we have seen what waits if we do not hold together. The North remembers." Robb nodded. "I wish I could see as you do." Bran smiled. "I wish I could fight as you do." They laughed, then, and for a moment were just boys again. Two sons of Winterfell, watching the sky for omens and the woods for wolves. As the snows thickened, ravens from the south brought tidings of change. King's Landing shifted again. Cersei's rule weakening, new alliances forming, rumors of dragons and magic in the east. Sansa wrote that the Queen Regent was ill, her grip on power slipping. Arya sent word that the Brotherhood without banners had risen anew, championing the cause of small folk, their banner half-wolf, half-flame. Maester Luwin shook his head at every new letter, but Bran saw in them the slow, hopeful crawl of something better than war. The first signs of a new order, born from the ashes of the old. In the midst of it all, Bran's fame spread. Lords sought his blessing before great decisions. Small folk sent tokens and questions, hoping for a glimpse of the future or a cure for a long aching hurt. He answered as best he could. Sometimes a vision, more often a story, always the truth as he saw it. But he warned them, again and again, that the future was a river, not a road, and every oar dipped in its waters could change the course for good or ill. He watched the wall. Always. From Castle Black, Jon wrote less now. The watch busy with free folk settlements, new watchers at every post. The threat of the dead faded, but never forgotten. Ghost remained the fiercest sentinel, his first Snow White even in the dark of winter. Samwell Tarly sent books, old legends, fragments of prophecy, always hoping to learn more, always ending his letters with hope for peace. On a clear day near the year's end, a great gathering was called at Winterfell, a council of all the northern houses, the Riverlords, even envoys from the Reach and Dorne. The new king in the south, a boy of uncertain claim but strong will, sent his own ambassador, and for the first time in memory, all the great powers of Westeros sent representatives to sit in peace beneath the Stark banners. The great hall was hung with garlands, fires roaring. The three swords gleamed above the dais, watched by every lord and knight. Robb resided, Catelyn at his side, Tyrion translating for the southern lords, Bran seated beside the hearth. When the time came for debate, voices rose, some angry, some hopeful, many uncertain. But the talk was not of vengeance, but of borders, treaties, laws. When the hall grew tense, Bran spoke, quiet but clear. "We have seen what comes when we forget the ties that bind us," he said. "We have seen the wall break and be mended. We have seen old enemies fight side by side. Let us be wary of fear. Let us be wary of fear. Let us build as we did before the winter. Together, not alone." It was not a king's speech, nor a priest's, but it held power. The lords listened, and when the council ended, it was with agreements made, old wounds bound, and promises, at least for now, kept. That night, after the feast, Bran went alone to the Godswood, summer padding beside him, the moon rising full over the pond. He traced his hand along the heart tree's bark, feeling the slow throb of sap beneath. In the reflection on the water, he saw not himself, but all who had come before, Starks and wolves, children of the forest, wildlings, the watch, the songs of thousands of years. "Are you lonely?" a voice asked. It was Sansa, standing at the edge of the trees, her hair unbound, eyes shining. Bran shook his head. "Not lonely. Just awake." "Namet Penimo." Sansa sat beside him, her gown trailing in the grass. "Mother says you never sleep." "I sleep," Bran replied. "But the world doesn't. Not really. There's always another story, another choice. She smiled. Then tell me a story, Bran. Tell me how it ends. Bran watched the moonlight rippling on the pond, the stars wheeling overhead, summer's gentle breath at his feet. It never ends, he said at last. But if we're careful, if we're kind, if we remember, maybe it keeps getting better. Sansa nodded, and together they watched the moon climb higher, silent as the old gods. The years slipped by, slow and gentle. Bran grew taller, stronger, though he never walked again. His wisdom deepened, his fame spread, but he remained as he had always been. A boy with a wolf, listening for the world's song. Robb wed daughter of House Manderly, and their children played with Bran in the Godswood, chasing summer's offspring through the long grass. Arya returned at last, wild and grown, her eyes full of distant places, but her laughter was the same. Sansa rose in the south, her name spoken with respect and wonder. Jon remained at the wall, but the watch was smaller, more a brotherhood than an army. And there was peace between the wall and the wild. Catelyn died at last, old and beloved, her grave marked with a white rose and a wolf's tooth. Tyrion sailed east, seeking knowledge in the ruins of Valyria. Maester Luwin passed the glass candle to a new generation, and Gendry became master smith of all the north. And Bran, the true seer, the boy who turned the river, watched it all, not as a king or a god, but as a keeper of stories. When the world darkened, he would listen. When it brightened, he would smile. The wall never broke again. In the end, Bran knew it was not magic or prophecy that saved them. It was mercy and memory, and the stubborn hope of those who refused to let the darkness rule. His was not the story of a conqueror, but of a witness. The boy who saw and remembered and told the truth. So the seasons turned. The North remembered. And the story, for those who listened, never ended, but kept turning, like the river, like the sun, like the world itself, always onward, always toward the light. Mahoney and Patty. The world had softened, but the river did not rest. In the great round of years that followed the council at Winterfell, Westeros changed in ways slow and subtle as the growth of the heart tree's roots. Spring and autumn, snow and thaw, the pattern repeated. Familiar, yet never the same. Children grew to adulthood. Old men and women faded, and the scars of winter faded to memory. Bran moved among it all, present but apart, the axis about which so much spun. His hair darkened, and then began to lighten with the passing seasons, though he still wore the loose tunics of a Stark child, and his features remained sharper and more solemn than those of any other young lord. Summer kept watch by his side, his gray muzzle grizzled now, yet still able to summon a growl that would send squires and lordlings scattering in startled laughter. The wolf's offspring grew up wild in the woods and tamed in the yard, and the legend of Winterfell's living ghosts stretched from the neck to the white cliffs of Skagos. The three swords above the hearth kept their silent vigil. Sometimes Bran caught sight of a visitor, lord, hedge knight, free folk chieftain, staring at the runes, and the power still sleeping in their edges. Sometimes, in the fire's glow, Bran thought the runes flickered with a secret light, as if some inner fire responded to his glance. When the wind howled and the night seemed thin, he would bring the blades down, run his fingers along the metal, and listen, not for warnings, but for reassurance, the sense of ancient things at peace. He dreamed as ever, but his dreams were more often gentle now. The river running clean, white fish darting in the shallows, children laughing on green banks. Yet the river still brought omens, and sometimes Bran saw storms on distant hills, or the long shadow of a dragon's wing across the summer sea. In these times he would send word, quietly, through the network of maesters and ravens and whispered rumors. His warnings never carried the weight of royal decree, but in the north at least they were heeded as surely as the king's law. Robb's rule was steady, but the world beyond the neck refused to still. The Ironborn harried the western coast, their raids a bitter echo of the old ways. But they never came north of the rills, wary of tales of deer wolves and of the wall's strange new power. In the Vale, Sansa's star rose even higher. Her court was a place of song and justice, where children were taught the names of the rivers and hills, and the old stories were spoken at every feast. Arya roamed the kingdoms on foot and horseback, her face known and unknown, her sword a secret that flickered in the hands of outlaws and freedmen alike. Jon Snow grew older at the wall, the weight of command carried in the set of his shoulders and the silver at his temples. He wrote less often, but when he did, his words were direct, sometimes stern. The Watch was small, but strong, and the wildlings beyond the wall were no longer enemies, but kin, in all but name. Together, they built new villages, opened old mines, and sent explorers north to map the rivers that flowed beyond memory. As years slipped by, the people of the north learned a quiet pride. The wall had not fallen. No dead things walked the snow. Even in the harshest winters, the herds returned. The crops broke ground, the young grew strong. Lords from the Reach and the Riverlands came north to study how Winterfell's springs warmed its stones, and how the godswood never froze. Some returned south to build their own green halls, planting heart trees grown from seeds Bran sent by Raven. One autumn, as the leaves blazed red and orange on the ancient oaks, a great tournament was called at Winterfell. Lords and knights gathered from all the kingdoms, some for glory, some for curiosity, all drawn by the legend of the Starks and their Seer. The yard rang with laughter and the clash of arms. Archers from the Mountains of the Moon bested the Manderless. A wildling champion defeated 3 squires from Old Town. A girl in black and silver armor, her face hidden by a visor, took the prize in the sword dance, besting men twice her size. Later, she knelt before Bran and removed her helm, and Arya grinned at her brother, her eyes fierce and shining. "Did you see me win?" she teased. "I saw you win, and I saw you let the tall one from Gulltown land 2 blows he did not deserve." Arya laughed. "A Stark should never win too easily. The world likes its stories more than its truths." Robb presided over the feasts, his voice booming, his children tumbling beneath the tables, playing wolf and knight. Tyrion sat at his left, drinking and telling tales, his wit now famous as any song. Sansa arrived from the Eyrie with her daughters, and half the Vale in tow, and even dour lords from the Westerlands looked twice at the woman who had turned the mountain stronghold into a place of learning and peace. Jon arrived at the last, his cloak heavy with frost, his hair flecked with snow, Ghost close at his heel. The Watch rode with him, a handful of black brothers, a few free folk, and a giant's child with hair white as the snowdrifts. The tourney ran 5 days and nights, and when it ended, all the banners were raised together in the yard. Bran watched from the ramparts, summer at his side, and for the first time in memory, he felt the world was as it ought to be, full of joy, of risk, of old wounds healing. That night, the feast spilled into the godswood. Musicians played harps and pipes, the tables groaned with venison and honey cakes, and the wine flowed free. Bran wheeled among the guests, exchanging quiet words, answering questions, laughing at riddles. When the moon was high, Arya slipped away to walk the banks of the pond, her reflection rippling in the silver light. "Do you remember when we were children?" she asked Bran, sitting beside him. He nodded. "I remember every day." She threw a stone into the water. "I don't remember everything. Too many places, too many faces. Sometimes I wonder if I ever really left Winterfell at all." "You did," Bran said. "But Winterfell never left you." She grinned, punching his shoulder. "Don't get wise, little brother, or I'll have to best you in the next sword dance." Summer rumbled, tail thumping. Bran smiled, content. As the years wound on, the wounds of the old wars faded. Cersei Lannister died in her bed, her last years a confusion of bitterness and regret. Stannis Baratheon vanished in the east, his ships lost to a storm beyond Lys. The Iron Throne, much diminished, passed to a line of kings and queens who learned to rule not with fire and sword, but with counsel and careful word. In the north, the Council of Lords became the norm. No ruler above all, but Robb's line remained the heart around which the rest revolved. Sansa's children married into the Riverlands and the Stormlands. Arya's stories became the subject of plays in Old Town and King's Landing. And Jon, when at last he was old and gray, handed the wall's command to a new generation, and journeyed into the far north, seeking the white valleys where the sun never set. Bran endured. His hair silvered, his face grew lean, but his eyes held the same ancient light. He was no king, no warlord, but a witness. Children born after the winter's end came to sit at his knee and ask for stories of wolves and ice, of dragons and the horn that had been blown 3 times. He told them what he remembered. And when he reached the part where he had to choose how the story would end, he always left it open. Some things are meant to be finished by those who come after, he would say, and the children would nod, content with mystery. The God's Wood became his court. Men and women traveled hundreds of leagues to kneel beneath the heart tree and ask their questions. Some about love, some about loss, some about futures Bran would not reveal. He answered as he had always done, gently, truthfully, reminding each of them that the river of time belonged to all, and that every choice sent ripples outward, changing the world for good or ill. The blades above the hearth rusted in places, their magic not fading but settling into sleep. No more dead things troubled the snows, though old men in the watch would sometimes speak of shadows glimpsed on moonless nights, and wildlings told tales of pale wolves and tree-eyed spirits that guided lost travelers home. One winter's eve after the last leaf had fallen, Bran sat beneath the heart tree, wrapped in a thick cloak. The pond was frozen, the moon pale. Summer was gone at last, his grave marked by a single stone. Bran was not alone, though. He never was. The God's Wood was full of ghosts. Some he knew, some he only felt. He rested his hand against the tree and closed his eyes. He saw his family, Robb and his children gathered by a hearth, Sansa in her sunlit garden, Arya vanishing down a road that never ended, Jon standing at the edge of the world, looking north. Always north. He saw lords and small folk living lives touched by peace. He saw children playing in the snow, singing the songs that remembered the dead but were not haunted by them. The river ran on, broad and deep, its waters mingling the past and the future. Bran smiled, listening, content. On the day Bran died, the sky was clear, the air crisp. The whole of Winterfell gathered in the God's Wood. Robb's children, Sansa's, Arya's, Jon's descendants, and all those who had known Bran's wisdom. They sang no grand psalms, made no boasts, only spoke of the Seer's quiet kindness, of the day he had saved the world, and of the nights he listened without judgment. Afterward they carved his name into the heart tree. When the wind blew, it seemed to whisper his stories. The river ran on as rivers do. Peace lasted, as peace always does, only as long as men remember the reason for it. But the North remembered. The wall stood, and somewhere, in the bones of the earth, and the dreams of sleeping children, the quiet voice of the boy who saw the future murmured still, reminding all who listened that the smallest choice can change the world, and that the end of every story is only the start of another. And so the tale of Bran the Seer passed into legend, woven into the tapestry of the world, a thread of hope that ran from winter into spring. Forever and ever, so long as anyone dared to dream.